In this video I'm going to explain how I animate and position the trailing bogey for the carriage section of this Great Southern and Western Railway loco number 92 with its carriage section attached, which you can see in the photograph behind here. So this is the carriage section that I'm working on at the moment. It's not finished, but I've had a go at the bogey for underneath, and I think it's as detailed as I'm going to get it based upon the photograph. There's other information there, but I just can't work out what's going on. So this is going to be it. So the first stage is to save this file as save as. So I'm going to call it carriage bogey. There we go, and it's going to be version 1 because I use incremental versions in order to save my work as I go. So carriage bogey version 1.1, and it's 5'3" gauge. It's the Irish standard gauge. So I'm going to save that, and that's saving everything. And now I'm going to delete everything I don't need, and you can see there's a fair bit of stuff here which I've been working on, and I can just delete all of that because it's not necessary for the bogey. And in fact, when I go back into the carriage itself, I'll actually delete the bogey. But in the meanwhile, this is the seating inside. So this is just to give me leave me with just the bogey. Now, what else have we got there? We've got the base of the carriage, and I'm not going to worry about the wheels sticking through, as it were. So that'll be hidden. Okay, so there we have the bogey, and some of the rendering isn't as good as it should be within Gmax, but I think we can get away with it. So there we are. That's about all I can conjecture from the photographs. So now let's animate it. So the first thing to do is to go into the top view. You must do it in the top view. And what we're going to do is we're going to rotate the wheel sets 360 degrees, and at the moment they are in a single group. So I'll ungroup it, and that should give me these two. You have to set the two wheel sets separately. Now we've got all this other mesh as well, which doesn't rotate, or at least it shouldn't. So I'm going to come back and show you how to, as I work through this, I'll show you how to include that in the overall mesh of the bogey. So let's, we're going to be using a dummy object, and I'm going to call it, now you've got a naming convention here. It has to be B full point, R full point, and then you can call it pretty much what you like. I'll call it axle 0, and I'm going to center it on that axle there. Okay, and then I'm going to take a clone of that, and I'm going to take out the 0 before the 1, so it's axle 1, and I'm going to center it on this one here, X, Y, Z. Okay, now we need to do the animating. So come down to the bottom right hand corner, and here you have the little time configuration, and we want 30. It's actually 0 to 30, which makes a frame count of 31. So that's okay. And we're going to toggle animation. So animation is now live, and we're going to use the rotate, and we want to rotate in the x-axis. I think that's right. And I'm going to jump to the previous frame, which is 30, which is the end of the cycle. So 0, if I go back to 0, that's the start point, and 30, frame 30 is the end point after doing a full 360 degree rotation. So using the rotation tool and click and hold on the dummy, and then I need to look down to see the relevant one. It should be in the X one, I think, which goes 360. So I'm just going to click and hold, and I'm dragging it down, 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 and I'm watching that box down on the bottom right until I get to 360, 55, 360, and then I let go. And then I can do the same with this one, because remember I'm still at frame 30 in the animation. So drag it down to 360, 360, there we are. Okay, so that's the animation of those two. And if we were to look in this window here, we'll see those two dummies rotate if I play the animation. There they go. Okay, well that's pretty straightforward. So how do we get the wheels actually rotating? Well, what we do is we link each of the wheel sets, which are in a group at the moment, to the relevant dummy. And here's our link tool up in the top left, and so I click on that, and it tells me everything that's highlighted here will now be linked to BR axle 0. I think that's right, I've got that right. And let's just have a look here. Let's just click on that. I think I did it right. No, I didn't. That was clever. So what I do is I'll go back and repeat this. So I'm going to use the link tool. So I've selected this, and I'm going to link it to BR axle 0. There you are. That's a more accurate way of doing it. And there we are. We see that just flashed a moment there. And still with the linking tool selected, I'm going to do the same there. BR axle 1, and you just saw that just flash briefly. Okay, now we can turn off the animation. That is, turn off editing the animation. The animation's still there, and now we can play it, and there's our wheels spinning round. So that's the animation, and that's all we need to do with those. Just make sure it's always at frame 0. But if we just export that, then all that will happen is that one of those dummies will be picked up by Trainz, and only one of it will be displayed, none of the other parts of the bogey. So we need another dummy, because what we're going to do is we're going to attach everything now to this dummy. And so I'll just draw another dummy, and my naming convention for this, always you've got to start B point, R point, and then I tend to call it main. Just what I do. There we are. And I'm not worried about this position yet. So now we're going to position it. We want it centered at the same X, Y, Z. So it's on the one of the axles, but now we want it centered across the bogey. So I'm just going to do one more, which is I think the y-axis. It puts it in the center. Now why is this important? Well, it puts the dummies that we created around each axle are now in the center position of the wheel, and now this main dummy is at the same center position of the wheel, and it's in the center position side to side of the bogey up here. So it's in the center overall of the bogey, but of course the bogey is, if we pull back on the grid, the bogey is away from our origin point. It's in the position, the actual position is, if we had the rest of the carriage there, carriage section there, and then we had the loco there, well, the reason why it's positioned there is because that was the center point of the loco, and I just added the carriage section on, and I'll need to adjust all of that when I export the loco plus carriage section together. They'll all shuffle along to the left a bit, but that will become clear as I do it. So now we've got BR main. So what use is that? Well, the great thing about this is if we go into select, and if we display the subtree, And what the subtree is showing is those two other dummies plus the animated, or the meshes which are animated by them. So these move according to that dummy. So when that dummy moves, these move as well. Everything in that's subordinate to it. But we've got all these other things which aren't subordinate to anything. So now what we can do is pick up all the things that are not subordinate to any of these dummies so far. Let's do those. Let's select all those, and that's the rest of the bogey. And we're going to make it subordinate to BR main. Now you see those two wheel sets are each subordinate to the axle dummies. Okay, that's fine. The only problem with this is that if we load it into Trainz, this dummy, BR main, will be the one that Trainz displays with its everything that's attached to it, and you'll remember this is what's now attached to it. But what it won't show is the wheels, and you'll get none of the animation. So now the next thing to do is to attach those to BR main. So we've got a distinct subtree, a hierarchy, that with this as the core, the trunk, the main section, the main determinant of the whole collection of meshes. But what we don't want to do is to link the wheel sets directly to BR main, because they would then lose their animation, which is dependent on being linked to BR axle. So what we do is we just pick up the two dummies which have the wheel sets, and we're going to make them subordinate to BR main. Okay, so if we now look at the hierarchy, we can see we've got, that is the base of the hierarchy, that is the controlling part, and then it's got these bits of mesh which are the sides and springing and axle boxes, etc., of the bogey. And then we've got two dummies subordinate to the main dummy, and each of those is a group which is the wheel sets. Okay, so that gives us our hierarchy. Now this is still not in a condition to be exported, but what it does do, of course, is it means that we've got our animation. There it is. Or if we want to look here on this one, there's our animation going away. Okay, always return it back to the 0 frame. And so the next thing we want to do is to make sure everything is basically reduced down to the basic polys. And the way that I would suggest you do this is the most effective way, is first of all to pick up any dummies and hide them so that you're not affecting them. Then select all of your work and just ungroup everything. You can sometimes get away with grouped meshes being exported into Trainz, but it can cause problems. So we'll ungroup that. And we're still not going to reveal the dummies. We're not going to work on the dummies at the moment. What I do want to do is save. And I'm going to save as, I'm going to create a duplicate there. So it's going to be version 1. Version 1.1 is here. Version 1.2 is now here. So I've got two copies, just in case we crash. Gmax does crash on occasion, so we want to be careful about that. Now, we want to make sure that our polygons are down to a minimum. They're the smallest number that we can get away with. And at the moment it's 3012, and I'm not sure whether it's possible to reduce that number. So I'm just going to pick up a few of the meshes, and let's just do that. And then I'm going to right click, and it's going to crash. There we go, it's crashed out on me. So I'm going to leave that, I'll let that crash, and I'll come back to it. So we're back now with Gmax rebooted, and let's see, keep the polygon counter handy. I want to make sure, see, that's an editable poly. That's an extruded spline, At the moment it's 180, so by collapsing it down to a poly I can get that down to 48, and already we're under the 3000 mark, which is good. And there's the one the other side, so I can collapse that, get that sorted. And essentially what I'm doing now is just to make sure that everything is collapsed down. I'm pretty sure that everything was down to a poly. Just means that the actual size of the bogey will now be 2748, and I'm going to try this again. It may well crash. It's a possibility. I mean, it happens to me quite regularly, so I'm quite used to it. I have reinstalled Gmax on several occasions. It's a glitch as far as this is concerned. For free software, I'm prepared to put up with it. So I've picked up everything now, so this is going to be a sort of major, if it works all well and good, but if it doesn't it'll crash out again and I'll have to restart Gmax. So I've right clicked 2748, there's no, everything is now polys. So as soon as that's succeeded, I save that. And remember it's version 1.2, so, or 1 second copy. So I'm going to save it as 1 first copy. Okay. And now we can unhide our dummies. The only reason I hide those while I do that process is to make sure that they're not affected by it. Actually, what I'm going to do is hide them again. So I've just gone back, select everything, and now I'm going to reset X form. That resets the orientation of every mesh, every poly, so that it's correct. Otherwise you sometimes get that sort of inside out effect on one. So if you've copied, as I've done here, copied some of the like I created this, click away, I created this springing and axle box and that, and then I just simply cloned it and rotated it, and it's in the rotation that sometimes it loses its way. So resetting the X form is a very good move to do. So that's reset everything, and now what will happen is when you click on a mesh you'll get this yellow box, and if you want to lose that you can collapse down, but it doesn't make any difference. But that really is an important thing to do before exporting. Okay, so here we are back with our carriage bogey. I'm just going to save it again. You can't save these things too many times. You can't oversave them. So we have our, let's have another look. We have our nicely rotating bogey. Now, how do we get that into Trainz? Okay, so the first thing we need to do with this, I'm just going to minimize that, and I'm going to start. I've got a spreadsheet of my models up here. Opening it in OpenOffice. Here we are. That's some interiors. So this is a spreadsheet showing all of the QIDs, and I think there's the bogies, locomotives, rail cars and vans, cattle wagons. My goodness, there's a lot here. Scenery. I keep meaning to adapt this in some way and put it on my website. I will get around to it. Some of these you'll see are, that's my number 169585. 254127 is Ricky Sykes, who died, what's it now, 2008, 2009. We worked together in the early days of making these things. But so anyway, I've still got some of his stuff here. Some of the stuff that we jointly made still on his QID, though I don't use it anymore. So it's going to be a bogey, and let's make sure that is, don't know why that's offset like that. There we are. And I do have, so it's going to be the Great Southern and Western Railway 92 carriage bogey. 5 foot 3 inches. Don't know why it's decided to start indenting. And I've got a piece of paper in front of me here, so I'm going to write down that the bogey number, the QID, and that of course is going to be 169, is the next one along, 169585, and whatever office you're in, whatever spreadsheet program you're using, make sure you do the right one, 50388. And there we are, 169.50388, and I'm just making a note of that because I'm going to show you how I then create the config file for this. So having done that, make sure you save it, and we can close that as long as we've got a record. That's all that's important there. And we go back in here, and that's our bogey. So we need some more information before we can actually produce the config. What we need is the circumference of the wheel, the driving of the wheel of the bogey, and if they were wheels of two different sizes, you would make you would export this as two separate bogies, because the larger wheel would have to turn slower than the smaller wheel, but these are both the same size. So let's have a look there. And the way I do this, because I can never remember the diameter, is I just select a box and I draw a box from the wheel across to the far side, and I'm not worried about the depth, and it's actually 3 foot 3 inches, 0.91 feet, so it's 3 foot 4 inches is the actual diameter of the wheel. And what we're going to do is use very simple little equation. Once I've got that diameter, I can then just load up the calculator. Here we are, let's move that into the middle. So 3 foot 4 inches, so I'm going to use a conversion. Where are we? Length converter. This is the calculator that comes with Windows. So 3 foot 4 inches is 3.66 feet. No, it's not. 3.3, so clear that, it's 3.33 feet, and that gives me a metric conversion, and you need to do this in metric. So that's 1 meter 014984. Well, go to two places after the decimal point, so I would go to 1.02 there, 1.02 meters, and I'm jotting that down again. Okay, so now we need to go to the ordinary calculator, because we need to, that's the diameter, half that would be the radius, that would be 0.51 would be the radius, but the diameter is fair enough. We're going to use the equation 2 pi r, r being the radius. Well, we can eliminate the 2 and just have it pi times the diameter. So instead of it just being from the center of the wheel out to the tire, the edge of the wheel, it's from one side of the wheel to the other. So let's put 1.02 in, and we're going to multiply by 22, because that's the top part of the, and then we're going to divide by 7. 22 over 7, that's pi, and that gives us a circumference of 3.21, and I'm writing that down again, 3.21 meters. Okay, so we can forget, once we've got that noted down, and I'm carrying, if it's 5, if the third digit is 5 or more, I bring that up to 1 there, or add an extra 1 there. Okay, now what do we do by way of making a config file? So let's have a look at a config file. This is a config file for a locomotive I haven't released yet. This is a training bogey for a 44 OT Great Western Railway locomotive, number 34. And here's the config. Okay, But let's have a quick look in the folder here. This is a folder with all my current, or all the models I've produced in Tame, and you get the subdivisions of bogies, Trainz, that sort of thing. So we're just going to make the bogey for this one. So here we've got the bogey itself, that's the mesh. There's a screenshot that we need to have. There's the animation file that drives the wheels. Here's the config, and all the rest here. That's a texture file which relates to frames and the reflection file there. And we've got the reflection there as well. So it's quite a simple simple folder. So what I do though is I'll copy it, and I'll go up one, and I know I've got some, yes, I've got a Great Southern and Western Railway. That's the locomotive bogey in 5.3. So I'm going to put a Great Southern and Western Railway number 92 trailing. I tend to put underlines. Trailing bogies, there we are. Oh, we've got an ampersand in there, so I'll put an ampersand in, there we go. So trailing bogey. And if I open that folder up, I just paste in. Now those are all the files for number 34. So I'm going to leave the screenshot, I'm going to remove the frames. Those are all the textures. And I'll leave the screenshot in just to remind me that I've got to update the screenshot. At the moment, if we look at it, here it is. That's the loco which is in the process of production at the moment. Okay, so let's close that and open this copy. It's just the same. So now let's have a look at the config file. Well, first of all, this is for Trainz build 3.5, and at the top I've got the KUID, which I now alter to 50388. That's the number you remember that I put onto my models list up here, and that's me. And then I'm going to change it from Great Western Railway to Great Southern and Western Railway. So that's Ireland. It is standard gauge because it's Irish standard gauge, but I'm going to take all that off, and I'm going to call it number 92 trailing bogey. So, and in the description, keep it fairly minimal. I'm going to put Irish standard gauge, and then number 92 with carriage section trailing bogey. Anim distance, the distance of the animation. Remember, you wrote it down, I wrote it down as 3.21 meters. Direct drive tells Trainz whether to use this bogey to produce the chuffing sound, or the I suppose diesel or electric sounds. But this isn't a driving bogey. This is a trailing bogey. The bogey for the locomotive section is the driving bogey, and so that would be 1. And here's the mesh table bogey. There it is. There it is, and we don't need to direct it to the animation file because that's part of the operation. Trainz build 3.5 category class ZB bogey, and IE for Ireland. 1890s, that's okay, that's me, that's the license. And down here is the kind, what type of file it is. It's a bogey, so that's all pretty straightforward. And if you look in any config file, if you anything you've got on your content manager, you can have a look in anybody's config file. Make sure you get the Trainz build correct. This is suitable for Tame, and it'll also run in Trainz 2012 and it will be acceptable by the Trainz 19 and 22. But of course you can't, I think it's 4.6 now is the latest version. That wouldn't now run, that doesn't run in, I don't think it picks up in tame. No, it says it's incompatible. So that's our config file. Once we've got that, we can save it. And we then go back to our bogey in GMax, and now we're ready to export. So we're going to export everything, and we need to find where we're going to export it to tame models, bogies. Right, there it is, the Great Southern and Western, number 93 I've got. Oh, that's silly. So where are we? Should be 92. We'll change that straight away. I think it'll let me change it. Yes, it will. Sometimes it's open in the Explorer at the moment. Number 92. Now these bogies and this bogey and this animation file is actually from that Great Western Railway loco number 34, so they're completely irrelevant. But they're a reminder to me as to what to export bogey. That's the name I gave it in the, you'll recall, in the config. There's the name there. Okay, so that's what we're going to export, and we just click on save. Yes, we do want to replace it because it's completely different. Okay, and then we want to export the animation, the correct animation for our mesh. Yes, we do want to replace it, and you get another little window up here, a second window, export animation. Okay, so let's go back and have a look and see what we've got now. Well, we've got that updated bogey. We've also got a couple of files here which relate to textures, but there are no textures here at the moment. And we've got the animation file, and we've also got this GS&WR file which GMax continues to create, but we don't need it. So we can just delete that, get that out of the way. Then we need to sort, make sure it has these two textures. So here's File Explorer, and down, this is the actual my working folder for Great Southern and Western Railway number 90 and indeed number 92. So if you look here, there's that carriage bogey, that's those GMax carriage bogey files. So we scroll down. First of all, that's one we want, so we'll highlight that, and then we want another one called frames. So we come down to the TGA files, not the JPEGs, the TGAs. There it is. And so we'll pick up frames, and we'll in fact what we can do is just drag them over, and there we are. And you must make sure that, I mean, you can do this in GMax, export the actual textures as well, but I found this is the more reliable way. I tend to lose track of where I'm saving them. So if you go into these texture files, there we are, envelope or NV metal VMP, there it is, and then frames texture, frames TGA, there it is. And in fact, if we look back into the actual frames texture file within the bogey, you'll see it's the frames TGA there, and in fact the reflection file, which I just give it at 2%, just enough to give it a little edge to it. And that means that is now finished. That bogey should now be working okay. And of course, what we can't do though is to test it in Trainz unless we attach it to a locomotive, and we're some way off doing that, but we can be satisfied that we've got the bogey more or less there. But there is a big but now, because we haven't really got it in the right place. Because if we look at top-down view, here's our XYZ000 origin point, and yet our bogey is way over there, which is not good at all. It's of no use whatsoever. And also because it'll just be in the wrong place completely when Trainz assembles the locomotive with its bogies, when you run it in Trainz. And in fact we can see here that the 0 height is actually the rail height, which is the way I normally prepare these. What we need to do is to have a point where the BR main, that central dummy which controls everything, which picks up everything, is in the place is over here at 0, 0, 0. But we need to know the spot where it is at the moment, because that's correct for the carriage body. So what I'm going to do is I'll just have a look at this, and we've got the position. So we've got it down here is the position. Okay, so we're going to have, I'm going to write this down so it's a bit more on my little scrap of paper. X equals 0, 0 feet 0 inches. Y equals 16 feet 8.814 inches, and Z equals 1 foot 8 inches, which is of course the radius of the wheels. As if you remember, we position that at the center of the wheel, therefore that equals the radius. And we just need to make a note of that. So having written that down, I'm now going to move this. 0, 0, 0 is where we want to be, so X is already at zeros, so Y, just working down here, 0 that, and Z, 0 that. That's the correct position for the bogey, and everything moves because it's, if you'll recall, it's all attached. Let's display that subtree to that. That controls everything. Okay, so having got it in the correct position, what do I do? Well, first of all I save it, and I'm going to save it again. My second copy, my backup copy, and now I'm going to export it again, and we're still in the correct place, look. So I'm going to export the bogey again because now it's in the correct place, and I'm going to export the animation again, up here, top left. Okay, and let's just have another look there, and it's recreated that GS&WR file, so we can delete that. So that's now in the correct place. Now why is it in the correct place? Because obviously it's now halfway down the sunk 1 foot 8 inches down into the track. It's not under the carriage anymore. It's just centered on itself, and that's because the bogey file, this bogey mesh, is of itself. And what we're going to do is we're going to tell the locomotive part of this composite model, we're going to put a point at that original position back here at 16 foot 8.814 and 1 foot 8 and 1 foot 8 inches up. We're going to put an attachment point on the loco body, or rather the carriage body, to tell it that at that attachment point, fix this. That's where the BR main goes. It'll go up there. So if I'd left that moved over here, then the that BR main over there would have meant that the bogey was sticking about 16 feet out beyond the end of the carriage. So this BR main combines with the attachment point which I add to the loco section or carriage section of the model, and that attachment point tells Trainz where to move this into position. But it has to be at the origin point of 0, 0, 0, X, Y, Z. And once you've done that, then that means you've created the bogey. So that's all I'm going to do in this video. So I hope I've covered the point of how to separate the bogey from your overall model, how to animate the wheel sets, how to ensure that all aspects of the bogey, of course if it was just a single wheel set, say for a 260 locomotive, and this was just a pair of just one wheel set, pair of wheels at the front of the loco, then you wouldn't have all this. you would just have the wheel set, and you'd have the BR main would be over the top of the axle as well. But because it's a 4-wheel bogey, that's why you need, and you want to have the rest of the bogey there, that's why you attach it to the BR main. So I hope that's been explanatory. If you have any comments or questions about it, please do post them, and I'll be happy to cover it in a future video. What I will be covering in a future video is how to attach this bogey to the locomotive and how you list it in the locomotive's config file. So it's a multi-part process. If I was to go and have a look at the carriage section again, let's go back there. I'm still calling it number 90. Scene has been modified. You want to save it? Yes, we'll save changes. Always doesn't do any harm. Right, it's saying it can't find frames for some reason. That's not very helpful, is it? And yet there they are. Did I move them or did I delete them by any chance? Could have done. Yes, I did. That was silly, wasn't it? Instead of copying them over, I moved them over. So I'm going to pick up those, copy, which is what I should do always. I normally do that. There we are, pasted it back into place. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to reload this. No. There we are, and they're back. So this is still a bit of a mess, but you can see that the that this is all offset at the moment. Eventually what's going to happen is I will have this piece, which I'm working on separately, attached to the loco, and then I will center all of that body on the XYZ. So that will mean that trailing bogey will be appearing about here. The driving bogey, which I've already done, if I just open that, let me see, it's a 5'3" driving bogey. There we are, version 3. There we are. So I've made this the driving bogey for the locomotive in exactly the same way, and you can see it here. It's showing that rather bizarre effect in the perspective view. But again, if we were to look at this, the hierarchy in this, you would see that, well, it's entirely one group at the moment, so I'll select the group and ungroup the whole thing. There we are, just for this demonstration. So if we were to look at the hierarchy, it's interesting, I haven't got any axles there. Must be on the other one. Display the subtree. Main, there it is, that's the main. So if we select that one, here it is, at 0, 0, 0, all the way along. And looking at this from the top down view, and if we look at the different axle, BR axles, I've got 1 there, 3 there, so I've got 2 there, so I'll just call them 1, 2, 3, just for difference. And also what you can see here, there are a couple of little dummies on axle 1. These are actually, so we've got a dummy there with the wheels rotating around that one. As that rotates, these rotate, but also 2 dummies are attached to this dummy as a subordinate, and remember that one is a subordinate of BR main. There's 2 dummies there, one stacked on top of another, and these are for the connecting rods. So if I just swing that over and then play it, because that dummy there is going around with this dummy, it's as it were like a planet going around the sun there. And what I did is as it went round, it would have, these connecting rods would have swung round like arms waving madly in the wind, like windmilling. But instead what I did is at 10, 20 and 30 frames I adjusted them so as to bring them back to the horizontal, so that they then act correctly as connecting rods. But the important thing is that this bogey is set for the correct origin. Okay, so that's the end of this video, definitely, and I'll be coming back with the next bits and bobs that I've done on the carriage section itself in my next video. Please do subscribe if you haven't done so. There's no obligation at all whatsoever. It's just simply gives me a number of people who have shown interest in my videos. And please post any comments, queries or questions, and perhaps maybe give me a thumbs up, which would be great. So until the next one.